With us, and we have been looking forward to this candidates forum. There's several things that we want to lay out in terms of those who are here so that you will understand how we are going to be approaching everything today. First, that we are in the sanctuary. We are in a house of worship. We are in a sacred space. And so, one, we would ask that everybody would carry themselves accordingly. Of course, no coarse language in this space. The second thing that we would ask that no placards for a particular candidate. This is not a debate. This is a candidates forum, which is an opportunity for the community to ask questions of the candidates that we have here. We also want to let you know, no passing out of campaign literature. You're more than welcome in the narthex to share that you are voting for whatever person that you may be voting for, but no passing out of literature. Second, the other thing that is very important is that we're asking as the candidates give their answers to questions that you will be providing and questions that are live streamed. We would ask that no applause. We are here to listen to the candidates as they present their vision for the city of Chicago. We are also delighted that we have an amazing and wonderful moderator, Sister Robin Robinson. We thank you for being with us today. And so we've got all sisters running things today, all right? And so we are so appreciative as you all come here to find out who will be our sister mayor. I like saying that we're going to have a sister running things no matter what. It's a wonderful thing to be able to say. So history is being made here in the city of Chicago. I'm going to turn things over after we pray to our chair of our church in society, also who is a sister, Dr. DeVette. But we're just going to have a word of prayer asking that the Spirit would rest here in this space because what we are preparing for, again, everyone who is voting, we recognize that we want to have a leadership in this city that is morally grounded, that it has moral courage, whoever that person may be. But we are thankful that you have made your way here, and we're also thankful for the hundreds of people who are watching by video stream. Our hashtag is hashtag TUCC Forum. Hashtag TUCC Forum. So please use that hashtag on all of your social media platforms, hashtag TUCC Forum. We would also ask if you are press that you would register if you are part of the media, and you will be given a press badge. If you are recording and you have not registered, and then one of these wonderful sisters or brothers will come over to you to see if you are registered. And we'll ask that you need to get registered if you are not as of yet registered. If in fact someone were to break the rules that we have laid here, we will be so kind and so wonderful and ask that you may exit the sanctuary and watch on your phone from then, okay? So we would ask again, we follow those rules. We're not going to be passing out campaign literature. There'll be no placards that will be going up. We will not be applauding for candidates. This is not a rally. This is a forum. A forum, an opportunity for you to ask questions of the candidates. If everybody should have given a card, and you can pass those questions up here to the moderator's desk. We thank you for being with us today, and if we would just bow our heads in a word of prayer at this moment. Gracious and most merciful God, as we come into this space at this moment, at this time, may a spirit of love, may a spirit of moral courage continue to rest not only here, but in the hearts of those who are servants of the people. We thank you and ask for your continued blessing and ask for your continued protection upon both of these candidates, that you may wrap your arms around both of them, keep them safe, and keep their families safe. We thank you. We thank you. We thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Javette Orgain. I'm the chair of Church and Society Ministry, and we On behalf of our members, we want to welcome you to our forum and thank our Reverend for introducing me. I want to give you, again, if you do not have the house rules, please raise your hand. If you do not have a index card for questions, please raise your hand and keep your hands raised. Additionally, I am the timekeeper, sort of like the sergeant at arms, and so the candidates will look at me in regards to timing. I can be a little ogre, so. But I also want to say that the time will be anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes for each question, and some of the questions will be seconds. Thank you, seconds. We'll never get.
They seem like 60 to 90 minutes.
We'll never get out of here if I say minutes, but thank you so much. But what we'd like you to do right now is silence your devices. Please silence your devices, take the time. And also, as Pastor said, videotaping on your phones is not allowed, but certainly we want you to do social media. So thank you very much for coming, and we hope that you will enjoy the information that you receive to make an informed decision. Additionally, encourage anyone and everyone and take someone out to vote. If you have an elder, make sure in terms of mail-in ballots, and if you have anyone, please, please, please encourage our youth who are able and anyone else. We must vote. Thank you.
Oh, the question was just asked of me. How's everybody doing, Trinity? I'm doing well, thank you very much. I appreciate the warm welcome I always get here, the only church where I am actually a member, and my no-show rate is real high, real high. But one thing I know about Trinity, it is the most connected community that I'm aware of, and it really is. And in those spaces where people are disconnected is where all the bad stuff happens. So connection is, and relation is everything. So just to get us started and warm things up, and those, welcome, first of all, Lori Lightfoot, Toni Preckwinkle, both friends of mine. In full disclosure, one of them will be my boss's boss. But as you have known me for more than 30 years, that does not make a difference in terms of my fairness. Those of you who are streaming, this is for you as well. Let's have just a little bit of fun at the beginning and see where we do have things in common, no matter how trivial they may be. So I'm going to take just 2 minutes to check some things out that you might not ever have a chance to ask these candidates because you would think, oh, why would I ask that? I have the opportunity for something serious. Let's do some things that, the little things that kind of make us who we are and how we are. So by a raise of hands, I want you to choose a side in a few very much daily, but maybe not that important of a category. For instance, and I'm going to say it first, and then we're going to vote on it by a raise of hands, and the candidate's the same. You come home, you got a taste for something, is it going to be sweet or savory? Hold on. If it's sweet, raise your hand. Sweet? Wow. Savory? Woo! Okay, there go the potato chips. Okay? You believe the best device is iPhone or Android? iPhone. Android. Alrighty then. You're going to the movies, you're going to see a romantic movie or a comedy? Romantic. Comedy.
Every time.
All right, last one, and this is the hard one because I know that you will be for both and all, whichever one of you becomes mayor, but for right now, answer this question based on your lifelong allegiance, where you been, who you with. Cubs, White Sox. Cubs. Woohoo! White Sox. See, we have a lot in common, folks, so thank you so much for sharing, and thank you all for sharing, and those of you at home who saw yourself in this as well. So I like the idea of having questions that have been offered in advance by people to write them down, not because we don't trust you with the mic, but because you really think about things a little bit more carefully when you have to write them down, and you're a little more lean. So We are going to start with each of you before we get to the questions, because Trinity is a church that is, am I right, unapologetically black? So, unashamedly black. Unapologetically Christian. Straighten me out, straighten me out. Thank you very much. I want you to kind of frame your answer in terms of its impact upon black people in Chicago. We always ask for an opening statement, and I'm not going to give you a theme. Just keep that in mind, that not that we don't care about everybody else, but to be very pointed in terms of the impact of your plans and your vision. In a brief, I guess I should give them 2 minutes, because you know they could take, no, 1 minute.
1 minute.
90 seconds, we'll split the difference.
Is tough.
Huh?
I said the Sergeant at Arms is tough.
She is tough, and I'm listening to her. 90-second opening statement that kind of helps us see your vision. And I will start, we got a coin to flip. Never mind, I'll just choose. I'm going to start with Toni.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here at Trinity. I've visited often when Jeremiah Wright was pastor, and now Reverend Dr. Moss. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. You know, we're at a crossroads in the city of Chicago. And I think I'm uniquely qualified by my experience and my vision to deal with the crossroads in which we find ourselves. I'm a teacher by profession. I spent 10 years in the classroom. I've worked for not-for-profit organizations. I spent 3 years working in the Harold Washington Administration Department of Economic Development, 19 years as alderman of the 4th Ward, and now the last 8 years as president of the Cook County Board of Commissioners. And let me just tell you, I've spent the entire public career, my entire public career, working for change and transformation. Working for change and transformation. Let me begin by my service as president of the Cook County Board of Commissioners. We have made the healthcare system in our county, which is half our budget, sustainable. We not only have our hospitals and clinics, which serve the residents of Cook County, but 320,000 people are served by our Medicaid expansion program, County Care, that I worked so hard to create and sustain. 320,000 people got health care as a result of President Obama's Affordable Care Act. And I'm very grateful to him and to all who have supported our efforts around making health care a right and not a privilege. We've also worked very hard on criminal justice reform. We have 4,000 fewer people in the jail as a result of our efforts, 4,000 people who are accused of nonviolent crimes and now are out in the community rather than in the jail waiting their trials.
Thank you. Ms. Lightfoot.
Good afternoon, church.
Good afternoon.
It is always a pleasure to be here in the presence of the faithful, and I appreciate Reverend Moss and the Trinity congregation for giving us this opportunity to speak to you all again. We were here right before the last election, and I'm grateful to be back this time. This election is about not only today and tomorrow, but really about our future, and particularly our future for our young people. It gives us an opportunity to make, I think, important choices about how we're going to speak our values. Are we going to be resigned to the same old, or are we going to be resolved to break away from the past and move forward in a completely different direction? I know, as many of you know, that we need change in our city. We have a number of challenges that we're going to have to face, whether it's the violence that rages out of control in way too many communities, whether it's not making sure that we have real affordable housing so people can afford to stay in their communities and not be forced out because of development and gentrification, whether it's rebuilding the social safety net so that we have good, affordable health care, child care, mental health services. But none of those things can be accomplished if people don't have confidence in the leadership of the city. People don't have confidence if we continue to abide by the corrupt past that has held too many people back. This is our chance to speak our values with our ballot. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and articulate a positive vision for the future. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So we have a lot of questions that have to do with finance. So let's start with the number crunching first then, right? The city of Chicago's projected deficit for is, for the coming year, $97.91 million. And, you know, I could be off by $1 or $2. You know, once you get above 90 million, I'm not sure it makes a difference. What is your plan for reducing the deficit? I'll start with you this time, Lori.
Well, not only do we have the structural deficit at the city of Chicago, but we also have to deal with the pension cliff, I'll call it, that's coming in early 2020. We have to make government run much more efficiently. We're going to absolutely have to have a conversation about revenue. But before we get there, I think we have to demonstrate to taxpayers that we're not continuing to treat them like an ATM machine without any limit. And how do we do that? A number of things. First of all, those of you who heard me speak before know that one of the things that I am very focused on is eliminating the excessive amount of costs that we're paying every year in police settlements, judgments, and attorney's fees. Approximately $50 to $60 million every single year, over $500 million in the last 7 years, which we go into the bond market and borrow at our terrible credit rating. If we do not get a handle on that issue alone, we are going to face dire financial consequences, even more than we face now. We also must look at things like, do we need a treasurer's office? Do we need a clerk's office that frankly perform functions that are similar to functions that are performed within the executive branch? We also need to make sure that we are focused on identifying and mitigating the risk that is causing way too much money to be spent in city government. I think we have to build the case for revenue by demonstrating to taxpayers that we are going to be good fiscal agents of their hard-earned tax dollars instead of asking for more and effectively lighting them out on fire. So those are the things that we need to address.
Thank you. Madam President.
You know, when I came into office in 2010, we had a $487 million gap to close in our budget, $487 million gap. So I have experience dealing with these kind of fiscal challenges. And let me just say, we always have to look at this through an equity lens. And that's why I start with state government. We need a graduated income tax at the state level, both to put the state on sound fiscal footing, but also because the state shares revenue with local units of government, cities, towns, and villages. And we want that revenue to be raised as equitably as possible. And when we look at the gap that needs to be closed in the city budget, we have to focus first on efficiencies. When I came into office, I asked all the 11 separately elected officials to a meeting, and I said, you've got to cut your budgets 15%. We have to have shared sacrifice. That's the only way we're going to meet this challenge. And we did. We cut budgets. We refinanced some of our debt. Unfortunately, one of the most difficult decisions of my life, we laid off 1,500 people. But we closed that budget gap, and we had balanced budgets for the next 8 years. We made $850 million in cuts. We cut our workforce. We cut our indebtedness. We did the difficult things that you have to do to balance budgets, and that's what we'll do in the city. Let me just say, we need TIF reform in the city. This is supposed to be an economic development tool, and yet all of the downtown, the most valuable property in the city, is in a TIF district. So we need to make changes in TIF, workman's comp, and look to other efficiencies to close the gap and balance the budget.
Thank you. Some specifics within that same area. Then I'm going to ask several questions in one, so you guys might want to take notes. Are you for or against the commuter tax? What are your plans for the water tax? And your position on capping property taxes? All right, it's almost unfair whoever has to go first because they didn't get time to think about all that, but Ms. Preckwinkle?
You want them one at a time, and is this yes or no?
You could, that would be great. It gets us a lot more questions.
No to a commuter tax.
Okay.
Water tax?
Mm-hmm.
You know, frankly, we are lucky in the city of Chicago that our municipality owns our water system, because in other parts of the country it's privately held. We need to look at how to raise money more as equitably as possible, and that's why I've supported a progressive income tax at the state level, as I said. I'm not prepared to commit to raising or capping any particular taxes because I'm not sure, frankly, what we're going to find when we get in office. And I think it's unfair to make commitments that you can't keep. But let me just say, the equity lens is the one we have to look at all of these issues. And we have to try to be sure that ordinary folks, working folks, are the least impacted, and we have to try to be sure that those who are the most privileged bear the burden of government.
Okay, Lori?
I oppose the commuter tax as well. And let me say this about taxes in general. We have balanced the budget over these last 7 years on the backs of people who are least able to shoulder the burden, and that is low income and working income families. What I've said to my team in looking at opportunities for us to raise revenue, two things. We can't do anything that strengthens or increases that burden on people who are least able to bear it, number one. Number two, we can't do anything that's going to drive business out of our city. We have to think about ways in which we are going to be expanding the tax base, not contracting the tax base. And this isn't one of the specific questions, but one of the things that I'm most focused on is the ticketing practices of the city of Chicago. We have to fix that. Regarding property taxes, we can't even have a conversation about it until we fix the broken and rigged property tax system that Joe Barrios provided over, which means that low-income black and brown neighborhoods are most affected by the property taxes. We have to fix that before we can talk about anything else.
Thank you. No applause. Thank you very much. I know it's hard. So, and all the questions, if you all are still thinking of some, remember they're not for one candidate or another. They need to be able to be asked of both. So staying in the financial realm, moving to small, first of all, let me thank you all. I have to do nothing but just, read your stuff. You've come up with amazing questions. What are your plans for small businesses in the community, and how will you work with the older men, older women to also help them to help the businesses? I'm going to leave that as one question. Yes, Lori.
Well, one of the, I think, cornerstones of our economic development policy has to be uplifting and strengthening small businesses in our neighborhoods. Let me say that again, in our neighborhoods. You know that in many communities on the south and the west side, there is very little small business activity. And the little that there is are businesses that are owned by people who don't live in the city of Chicago and don't hire from the neighborhoods. We have to stop that. We need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to provide grants, not matching grants, but grants, low interest loans, lower the barriers to capital, and provide a fertile breeding ground for entrepreneurs to take an idea and turn it into an actual business that strengthens the community and starts to build wealth. That is something that the city of Chicago has, I think, an obligation to do. I know that from my time helping run the city's procurement department and in my law firm practice working with small and middle market businesses. There's a lot that we can do to help grow our economy, but we have to have the city able to lead and make it a priority.
Thank you.
We're not going to survive as a city unless we put an emphasis on growth. And right now, our focus is almost entirely on downtown. You see lots of cranes, lots of development, and downtown is surely an economic engine for our city and for our state, but we can't focus only downtown. We have to focus on our neighborhoods as well. And so I always talk about the importance of balanced development, and not just investing in downtown, but investing in our neighborhoods as well. And we also have to have a city in which people believe that there's opportunity for themselves and for their children. So there are a couple things I want to say. First, I support a $15 an hour minimum wage, because people who work for a living should not live in poverty. And I have a plan to implement it by 2021. Secondly, we've got to support our small businesses. We need micro-lending programs, and I've proposed increasing the city's contribution to those so that people can start, build, and sustain their businesses. We need to change the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, which presently is a rebate program, to a grant program, so that really enables our businesses to get the resources they need to expand in our neighborhoods. Because our small neighborhood businesses hire our community people, and we really need to support them and encourage them.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you, Timekeeper, because we're going to get a lot of questions in. This is still financial, but it's also kind of a where you stand on this question. What is your, and it's two parts. What is your stance on recreational marijuana legalization? And with the passage of the recent Farm Bill, hemp is a new legal crop in the U.S. Rural farms are set up to reap profits of CBD, cannabinoid, I think I said it right, hemp seed oil, fiber, etc. Currently, Chicago residents cannot grow what is promising to be a very lucrative crop. So in addition to your stance on the legalization of recreational marijuana, do you have a plan or opinion about getting urban growers the ability to participate in this emerging industry? 1 minute, starting with Ms. Preckwinkle.
First of all, I've been a proponent of legalization of marijuana for a very long time. And the reason is that the drug laws in this country are not enforced equitably. The war on drugs has been a war on black and brown neighborhoods. And to the extent that people are arrested for drug possession, it's almost always black and brown people. And we know that illegal drug use is pretty much even across racial groups, but black and brown people are the people who get arrested. So I've been a strong supporter of legalized marijuana. But if we're going to have legalized marijuana, we have to be sure that all of our communities benefit from the businesses of legalization, and that means both growing and dispensaries. And we have to have a system, and there's some discussion about how we might do this, dividing the city up into regions, for example, and having only bidders that include neighborhood residents from those regions involved in growing and dispensing, so that the national companies don't come in and reap all the profits, and our local communities, as drugs are legalized, don't get the benefit of that now legal product.
Lori?
I too favor legalization, and survey after survey has shown that people in the state want that. The bill is going to be moving forward, I believe, this session to make that happen. What I've said is a couple things. One is we need to make sure that we learn the lessons of other states like Colorado and Oregon and now more recently California, so that we are using those best practices to inform the way in which we develop our legislation. I agree with President Preckwinkle. We need to make sure that when that happens, that black and brown communities that have been most devastated by the war on drugs share in the wealth, and that is in ownership and in the profits from legalization of marijuana. And we need to make sure in particular that the city of Chicago gets our fair share of the revenue that's going to come from regulating that industry. We also need to make sure that we right the wrongs that have come. And by that I mean there are a number of people who have arrest and conviction records for recreational marijuana. We need to have, as part of the state legislation, an effort to expunge those records so that they're not held back by something that now is going to be the law of the state.
True, because they would certainly be held back from participating in the industry.
Correct.
Based on that conviction. We're still finance, all right? Don't worry. Those people who are bored by the numbers, you know, remember that you're not, because you're Trinity. Senior, what?
I thought the oral was actually helpful. I thought your oral
okay.
comments are helpful, but however you want to do it.
Thank you, Doctor. You've each addressed the idea of affordable housing being a need. With the folks in my demographic, proud senior citizens, about to be the vast majority of the population, I'm wondering what your plans are, and do you see an urgent need for ensuring that there is enough affordable housing for seniors in particular?
I don't know who's starting.
Who's first this time?
Okay.
Lori, you're first.
Right. So we put forward a comprehensive affordable housing plan, and let me just frame the topic. We are in an affordable housing crisis. Depending on conservative estimates, we're down about 120,000 units of affordable housing. And if you look at our housing plan, the last page is what I'll call a heat map. In 2/3 of the city, not a single unit of affordable housing has been built in the last 15 years. And it's particularly concerning for seniors who are worried about whether or not they can stay in their neighborhoods. So I have a comprehensive plan to make sure that we put more affordable housing units online. It starts with the newly constituted housing department actually working more effectively with community-based organizations to allow them to get these deals online and eliminate the red tape that I think has prevented that from happening. We have to get rid of aldermanic prerogative. No one person should be able to play Caesar and say yay or nay, particularly when we are in a citywide crisis. The other thing we have to do is make developers build more units for families.
When I was alderman of the 4th Ward, we built 1,500 units of housing. Most of it was affordable rental housing. Some of it was mixed income, CHA transformation sites. Some of it was senior housing. Some of it was market rate housing. This was a priority for me when I was alderman, and we worked with community groups, we worked with developers, we worked with Chicago Housing Authority to make it happen. It's hard work. I know how to do it. We built 2 senior buildings because we wanted to be sure, 2 senior affordable housing buildings because we wanted to be sure that people who'd lived in the community their whole lives had an opportunity to stay in the community as they aged out of their single-family homes. And let me just say, it's hard work to bring developers to the table, to get them to work with community residents, to be sure that the work that they're doing, the housing that they're building, meets a community standard, to be sure that they hire community residents. And that's the work that I did for 19 years as alderman of the 4th Ward, and I'm very proud of the changes that we achieved in North Kenwood, Oakland, Douglas, and Grand Boulevard.
Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to a very important topic that's on people's minds, and the reason I'm doing it now is I'd like to get past it and then end on something, you know, more fun, like education, right? So let's talk a little bit about harmful behavior, violence, and harmful behavior, violence, and policing. First, a kind of overarching question. What specific plans for safety in our neighborhoods and a reduction in gun violence? And that question is asked by several people in several different ways, but that kind of sums up 5 or 6 questions. So, Toni?
I was a teacher for 10 years, and early on in my teaching career, I lost a student to gun violence. She was killed in a drive-by. She just happened to be on her front porch, the wrong place at the wrong time. And that was devastating to our community, our students, our faculty. You know, there was an empty seat in my classroom for the rest of the year. Everybody has the right to feel safe in their home and in their neighborhood. And the only way in which we're going to address these challenges is to have better cooperation between the police and community. Because, you know, you look on television, you think these crimes are solved in laboratories. They're solved by talking to people in the communities. We need better training and supervision for our police officers. We need to invest in community policing. We need training and supervision of our officers, and we also have to hold them accountable for performance. They've got to do much better in solving our violent crimes. But most of all, we have to invest in our neighborhoods because we're not going to change the violence dynamic unless we have investment in the young people who live in the neighborhood, in employment opportunities for them, and in business and residential development in those communities.
Thank you. Lori?
Your question was detailed plans. I urge people to take a look at our comprehensive plan. It's 18 pages with a lot of specifics. And it has 2 primary pillars. The first is this epidemic of violence that we're experiencing in our city is a public health crisis. Why I think it's important to frame it that way is it will compel us to look at the root causes. When we have 25% unemployment, so many of our communities living in poverty with no hope, no community anchors, and frankly, where the illegal drug trade is the largest employer, violence is going to follow. So we have to focus like a laser beam on the root causes of violence and backfill that with economic development, real jobs that can provide an affordable living, housing, mental health services, and the like. The other pillar is we have to deal with the gun violence. We have a reactive, not a proactive plan. I know that we can engage our federal partners, not just here, but in every state that is a source of the illegal guns, to have a proactive plan that focuses on the gun traffickers, the felons in possession, and the straw purchasers who are filling our streets with guns.
Thank you very much. Staying with that subject, there is a colleague at the police department who believes that the lack of solving crimes leads to more violence, that if you think you're going to get away with it, you know, as much as you are thinking in whatever condition you're in, right, that causes it to kind of feed upon itself. They're not going to catch me, no one's going to talk, etc. Translate that to this question about the clearance rate, a number that is of much debate, but this individual puts it as Chicago Police Department having a 17% clearance or solve rate of murders. What do you think you could do to help increase that dismal rate. And we're starting this time with
It's me.
you,
Yeah.
Toni. I mean, sorry, Lori.
She's Lori.
There's
I know y'all are not
similarities,
the same.
but
Okay,
a lot of
right?
differences.
Okay, Lori, thank you.
Look, again, as part of our public safety plan, the fact that 17%, only 17% of homicides get cleared is a statement of our values in all the wrong ways. We are saying to the victims that there's no justice for you, and frankly, we're emboldening the killers by telling them that they can walk the streets with impunity. How do we address that issue? We have to address it through accountability. We have to get the detectives out of their offices, into the neighborhoods, and forming relationships, just like the patrol division does, before there's a crisis, so that people trust and understand who these folks are. This isn't a question of our values in our community. The police department has to step up and accept responsibility for addressing this issue. We also have to make sure that our detectives are trained in the latest technology so that they are conversant in the tools that they need to use to be able to solve crimes. We also need to make sure that we are acting as aggressively as we can, making sure that the detectives are working with the patrol division to understand what's going on in neighborhoods and be proactive. But fundamentally, it's a question of accountability and leadership, and we didn't just get to 17% overnight. We're not going to solve it overnight, but we have to focus like a laser beam on doing a much better job. Thank you.
We're going to have to give Toni an extra 20 seconds on that, you know. You went over a little bit. Okay, you got him, timekeeper. Toni, equal time.
Well, there are a couple of components to this. The first is accountability in the police department. You know, nationally, 62 to 63% of the murders, somebody's arrested. There's a suspect arrested. In the city of Chicago, it's 17%. That means 17 out of 100 murders, somebody's arrested. Now, what that means in the community, and believe me, people know it on the streets, is there's the temptation to take the law into your own hands and to retaliate, to seek revenge yourself, because you know that in 8 out of the 10 cases, nobody's going to be held accountable for the murder of your brother, of your father, of your uncle, of your neighbor. Nobody's going to be held accountable. And as long as that's true, it's very hard to end the cycle of violence, because people will seek retribution and retaliation. We have to have more detectives, and we have to have more black and brown detectives. We can't have a detective corps that's only white people when the murders are taking place in black and brown communities. And we also have to deal with the people who've been shot, because if you've been shot, the chances are very good that you will be shot again in the next couple of years. And we have to heal not only the physical wounds that those who are shot have, but also the psychosocial wounds that they have, and help them heal. Help them change the arc of their lives, because otherwise they will be back in our emergency room again, shot.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, you've each talked about ways that to be more proactive and to bring federal partners, and as well as just having more accountability for justice and people taking the law into their own hands and seeking revenge. Revenge, justice, punishment, all part of the existing kind of formula that we've used to try to address harmful behavior. There's an emerging movement for restorative justice that has more of a focus on the victim as well as the offender. Do either of you have any thoughts on how that might be systemized or play a role in the current system?
Whose turn is it?
Lori. Lori. No? Toni? Thank you, Trinity. Toni?
The crowd's paid attention.
All right. I tell you, the county has always been a focus of criminal justice. We run the courts, we run the jails. So defendants are brought to us. And I decided when I became president of the county that we needed to intervene. We needed to try to end the pipeline that was bringing people from the community into our criminal justice system. And so for the first time, the county started investing in programs, community-based programs around violence prevention, around restorative justice, around trying to help people who had been in prison or jail reintegrate back into the community. Anti-recidivism programs, so people don't go back into jail or prison. And we've spent, over the last 5 years, $18 million, a beginning, We've spent $18 million on supporting community-based programs, some of them faith-based, that do exactly that, that work with people who've been in jail or prison, anti-recidivism programs, that work with young people around violence prevention, and support restorative justice programs. This is critical. If we're going to really make a dent in the violence and the shootings that take place in our communities, we're going to have to support community-based organizations that do this work. And let me just tell you, the city of Chicago has not been doing that. The city of Chicago, for the first time, has a violence prevention office, but they just took the grants that they had been distributing in other places and put them in that office. We've got to, frankly, put new money into those efforts in the same way that our philanthropic community has done with partnering for safe and peaceful communities, as the city has kind of stood on the sidelines.
Thank you. Lori?
These are issues that are very personal to me. Some of you know that I have a brother who spent most of his adult life incarcerated, the last stint 17 years in federal prison. He's now a man in his early 60s with a high school degree, no history of work, and he struggles every day. And I also want to note somebody else who's here. And I'm going to ask Albert Cleveland if you would just stand. Mr. Cleveland was one of my last clients. He was a young man who was arrested when he was 19 years old, and he was convicted of a murder and an attempt murder that he didn't commit. He spent 20 years locked up. After a lot of failed efforts on his part, we got involved through my law firm, and we offered him the same kind of full services that we did a paying client. And I'm happy to say that Albert has now got his life back because of his perseverance, but because of our help. These are issues that are deeply personal to me. I believe in the power of redemption, and you know this. Every month, thousands of people are returning citizens coming back into Cook County without any services to help and support them, coming back into the city of Chicago. We have to right that wrong so that our young men and women who come home have something to come back to and a reason and an ability to connect back up with the legitimate economy in our communities.
Thank you very much. So staying on the issue of safety, what will you do to diminish complaints about police misconduct and brutality? This is going to be a 19-part question. Okay, just a few. Because it also comes down to, do you believe police officers should live in the communities in which they police? What should be done about the shooting of unarmed black men in the back? And how will you address the silent code in the police department? That's all one big, very heavy 19-part question, like I said. And I believe we're starting with Toni. I lied. Lori. I'm just seeing if y'all are paying attention. Lori.
Well, police accountability and legitimacy is something that I've spent a tremendous amount of time on over the arc of my career, and particularly in the last few years. We have a roadmap. It's called the Police Accountability Task Force Report, a task force that I led. We also have a roadmap in the Obama Department of Justice report as well. Look, there are a number of challenges that we are facing with our police department. Fact is, it's not nearly diverse as it should be. There need to be more black and brown folks that are actually out on the streets and part of the detective corps and in senior management. We need to make sure that, frankly, we are holding officers accountable to break down the code of silence. We need to incentivize them when they see something wrong to intervene themselves. A lot of this, frankly, stems from poor training, but also lack of supervision. That's why if you look at our public safety plan, one of the things that we focus on is recruiting better supervisors, providing them with the skills that they need to be successful, but also holding them accountable when they fail. Those are, I think, some of the things that we have to do. In terms of diversity, look, the fact of the matter is we live in one of the most segregated communities in the country. We recruit from those segregated neighborhoods. We need to do a much better job of dealing with that reality, not only in the way that we recruit, the way that we train, and the way that we hold veteran officers accountable as well. Bringing people into the communities and building those relationships one-on-one is the only way that we're going to be able to move forward on a number of these issues, and I have a specific plan for that.
Thank you. Toni?
You know, I was alderman for 19 years. And I worked very closely with my commanders. We were in 2 police districts, with officers on the beat, and with community residents. Let me just say, you know, being a police officer is very hard work. And many of our officers are good and decent people who struggle every day to do a very difficult job well. And the problem in the city of Chicago is that there has been a tradition that those who are bad actors are not held accountable for their bad acts. And furthermore, their colleagues are expected to cover up for them. That's frankly been the culture in the police department. We have a code of silence, we have racism, and we have lack of accountability for officers' bad conduct. And that has a devastating effect on community confidence in the police. You know, I often say, Jason Van Dyke was convicted of the murder of Laquan McDonald, and he was the first officer in 50 years to be convicted of murdering one of our residents. But you and I know that he was not the first officer in 50 years to have murdered one of our residents. You and I know that. We have to hold our police department accountable for the bad acts of officers. And we have to have a police superintendent who acknowledges that there's a code of silence, that acknowledges that there's racism in the police department. Otherwise, we can't make progress. You can't deal with problems that you don't acknowledge. You know, you have to acknowledge your problems and then try to address them.
Thank you very much. As I said, we'd like to end on an uplifting topic, so we're going to switch to education. There are several questions about charter schools, specifically black charter schools. What actions would you take to promote schools like Betty Shabazz, Kwame Nkrumah, and Urban Prep, all schools founded and supported by the black community to ensure the educational autonomy and achievement for our black and brown students? And CPS has voted to close Kwame Nkrumah and Urban Prep West. Do you support these schools' appeals to stay open and continue to serve the community? And just to, you know, make it a little more overarching, what are your thoughts on charter schools? And we are starting with Toni. And I got it right.
So I'm a teacher. I spent 10 years in the classroom. I still consider myself a teacher. I always say that politics is public education. Let me just say, charter schools, the idea was that they were going to be a model for public schools, and we would take the best practices of charter schools and bring them into our public schools. But that's not what's happened. Our charter schools have become competitors to our public schools. And the challenge there is our neighborhood public schools take every child, every pupil that's in the area. But the charter schools don't have to do that. They don't have to take every child. And so my conviction is we've got to invest in our neighborhood public schools, our neighborhood public schools. And we have to be sure that they're well-resourced. Because right now, you can pretty much predict the quality of our public schools by the zip code the person lives in. In other words, the privileged communities have the highest performing schools, and our black and brown neighborhoods have under-resourced schools that don't provide the wraparound services that the children need to succeed. You need good teachers, but you also need social workers, you need psychologists. In some of our schools, you need bilingual support. We have to be sure that our schools are well-resourced, and that means we have to change the allocation not just per pupil, but on the basis of the needs of that community. I am a big proponent of neighborhood schools for that reason. Now, I have proposed an elected school board to be sure that our community residents have an opportunity to run our school system, just as everyone else in the state of Illinois does. Every other school district in the state has an elected school board. We're the only district in the state that doesn't have one. And I've also proposed a moratorium on school closings and a moratorium on new charters while we shift our investments to neighborhood public schools. We cannot have strong communities unless we have strong public schools. We cannot have a strong city unless we have strong public schools. And when I was an alderman, there were two things that people asked me when they were thinking about moving into my community. Are the streets safe and are the schools good?
And that's what they want to know. And one seems to kind of lead to the other, doesn't it? Where the streets are safe, it seems the schools are good.
Right.
I think that
I think
yes.
I need to answer the question.
See, I got it right in terms of order, but then I left you out altogether. Come on, Lori.
That's all right. I know how to speak up for myself.
That's good. No clapping, no clapping. No. Y'all been so good. Come on now.
Look, I'm a public school kid, and we didn't have great schools in the little town that I grew up in, but I was able to walk to school from kindergarten through 9th grade with kids that I grew up in. We formed a sense of community around our schools. Our parents knew each other. They were active in various school activities. That's what we need to get back to. We need to focus on improving the quality of our neighborhood schools. Right now, so many of our young people and little kids have to get up at the crack of dawn and travel many miles outside of their neighborhood for the hope of going to a decent school elsewhere. And intended or not, the message that we're sending them is your neighborhood is not worth investing in. We have to reverse that trend. I believe in community schools. And what do I mean by that? Schools that are open to the community, that provide a range of services, not just during the school day, but at night, so that parents can access them, young people can access them. They provide counseling and trauma-informed counseling, that they provide after-school programs so that the community benefits. We have some of those, but I want to make sure that we scale that up and return to that community school model. I also want to make sure that our schools are places that are nurturing and fun to be in. We've got to return the arts and sports and other activities that really round out the experience in our schools that have been stripped away over a number of years. We also, frankly, have to have librarians and nurses and counselors that are there in the school system that provide support to our young people. I want to make sure that we have a thriving neighborhood school system. That's why I have proposed a moratorium on charters. And it's not that all charters are bad, but they've stripped the resources from the open enrollment neighborhood schools, and we have to reverse that trend. And I too favor an elected school board where parents are actually participating as advocates. My mother was on a school board in the little town that I grew up in. That is the basis by which I support the elected school board.
Okay, that was going to be one of my lightning questions. Elected school board, you've already said yes. Lori, Toni?
Yes,
okay.
I spoke to it.
Yeah.
Term limits for the mayor?
Yes.
No.
Okay. This is, you not up there. A reduction of aldermanic privilege or prerogative?
I favor eliminating it entirely.
Toni?
I think the critical issue is that the mayor have a vision for the city of Chicago and try to bring people along. You know, I served in the city council for 19 years, and I know that aldermen are the closest people to their constituents. They have the smallest districts. They're the ones who best know the needs of their community.
That would be a no?
That's a no.
Okay, all right, okay. So now I'm going to give you guys an opportunity. First, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the way that you're conducting your campaign. We can show other people who are seeking office that you don't necessarily have to be opponents in a boxing ring. We really appreciate the tone and tenor and your non-evasive answers. This has been amazing. So let me give you a chance now for some 1 minute, 90 second. I'm begging for time for you. 1 minute closing statements, and I will start with Toni.
You know, I'm very grateful to Trinity for giving us the opportunity to share our vision for the city of Chicago. You know, I have spent my entire public life as a public servant, as a teacher, working for not-for-profits, working for Harold Washington, being an alderman, being president of the county board. I know what it takes to lead our city because I've led my ward and I've led the county. We've worked in the county to improve access to health care and to provide good quality care to people. We've worked to improve our criminal justice system. We've taken people accused of nonviolent crimes out of the jail. We haven't made poverty the basis for detention. I worked hard as alderman to build the communities I served. I worked with community residents to improve our neighborhood public schools. I worked with community residents to build up communities that were struggling, to revitalize them. We built thousands of units of housing, working with community residents, working with developers, working with the housing authority, 1,500 units of housing. And we brought jobs and economic development to the communities that I served. And we worked hard to improve public safety and address the challenges that those communities faced. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I have had to serve the people of the city and the county, and I look forward to serving you as mayor of the city of Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, Ms. Lightfoot.
Thank you.
Again, thank you to Trinity, Reverend Moss, and this tremendous gathering of people who love and are committed to their city. This is our moment. This is our moment to define the future that we want for ourselves. I think we need change, and I think that people all over the city recognize that we have the opportunity to break from the past and chart a new course for our city. I've said this before, and I think it bears repeating now. We cannot be a great city if the South Side and the West Side are left behind. We have to bring every neighborhood into a conversation about priorities and development and investment. And that is the future that I am committed to. We have this moment to make a difference in how we conduct ourselves, how we govern, and the ability to choose a leader who sees us, who hears us, and is committed to change. That is the choice that we have in this election. And let me just say this, no matter who you choose, whether for mayor or for alderman in the contested races, just come out and vote. It's critically important that we show up, that we give account, and we speak our values at the voting booth. Too many people died for the right for us to be able to vote. Don't squander this opportunity and give your strength and your power to someone else. Please vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank both of you. Thank you, Trinity. That's right. Now you can clap.
I want to take this opportunity to thank both of the candidates, particularly President Preckwinkle, who stayed longer, and Lori Lightfoot, and all of the persons who are here. But please, don't go. We have part two, we have Trinity United Church of Christ sits in the 21st Ward. And part of that, therefore, there's an aldermanic runoff. And so we want you all to stay here to hear what the aldermen for the runoff candidates for aldermen in the 21st Ward will have to say in regards to that information. So I'm going to ask the two aldermen. Okay. Can I have the aldermanic candidates please come to the front? So again, if you want index cards, please raise your hand for the aldermanic candidates. We want to certainly thank you for attending if you're leaving. We are live streaming. Again, the hashtag is TUCC Forum. No videotaping on your phones. And please, any conversations, if you can take them out into the atrium so that we can begin our next forum. Again, any social or anything, please leave the sanctuary quietly so that we can begin the second part of our forum. And